Hello, hello. Good morning. My name is Daniel Medeiros. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Computational Media Innovation Center, Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. And I'm here to present my recent TVCG invited paper, Magic Carpet Interaction Fidelity for Fly in VR. This work has been done in the scope of my PhD thesis at the Institute Superior Technical University of Lisbon. So, as VR gear has become more widely available, effective travel techniques have also risen in importance. Travel or locomotion is the act of translating people from one point to the other in the virtual scene in a given direction. Travel is one of the most common and universal interaction tasks in 3D interfaces and often supports another task in the environment itself. These include actions such as selecting, manipulating, and interacting with objects in the 3D scene. To evaluate travel, Bowman et al. Proposed quality factors which includes ease of learning, spatial awareness, appropriate use of speed, accuracy, and presence, which is the sense of being there in the virtual environment. One of the main classifications for travel techniques is by task decomposition, which separate travel phases by the act of indicating direction, controlling speed of movement, and input conditions, which indicates how the movement is initiated, continued, and terminated. A way to approach travel in VR is by addressing it with fidelity, which is a concept which relates to how close real-world sensory stimuli are reproduced. When dealing with the way people interact, this concept is called interaction fidelity. So the higher level of interaction fidelity a travel technique has, the closer it is to the way people walk in real life. Work by McMahon et al. Shows that the use of high interaction fidelity techniques such as the human joystick, which emulates the joystick but using people's bodies, can improve efficiency when using VR technology. However, objects may result out of reach and in remote locations of the virtual environment, and natural metaphors alone are not sufficient to support travel. In these cases, users may need to use fine metaphors to reach the spots. And one problem with this type of approach is the unnatural control of multiple degrees of freedom to support locomotion. Some attempts of flying is by using machines, such as a paraglider, a spaceship, a zero-gravity simulator, or Birdly, where the user fly by flapping their virtual wings. However, the use of such equipment limits users' actions to the action of traveling, which may not be suited for complex virtual environments where users need to perform for the actions such as object selection and manipulation. One example is the work by Wong et al., who uses a balance board to control flight in VEs. However, the use of leaning to control direction of flight led to 25% of the users to quit the test due to severe cybersickness side effects. Another example is the work by Bowman et al. In 1997, where the authors explore techniques that users indicate direction using their heads or hands and found similar results for both techniques. However, results are still preliminary as the virtual environment used did not include any obstacles and users were not able to see their own bodies. We argued that the coupling between direction indication and speed control enable to isolate the natural part of travel, which is the control of 6 degrees of freedom, enabling the use of high interaction fidelity techniques for speed control, which can improve the effectiveness of the flying experience. And when using high interaction fidelity techniques, users need to be fully represented by an avatar in the virtual environment, as even the user needs instant feedback. The use of an avatar also makes it easier to people locate themselves inside the virtual environment and affect their space judgments. So in this paper, we evaluate how interaction fidelity influence quality factors such as efficacy and spatial awareness on flying travel tasks. For that, we developed the Magic Carpet design space, which combines a fully embodied representation with a floor proxy to avoid imbalance issues. This design space enables the use of interaction fidelity metaphor for flying. To assess the best performing techniques on both direction indication and speed control phases, we conducted 2 separate studies, one for each phase. The best performing technique on the direction indicates phase was then used as means to indicate direction in the speed control study. In this study, we used an Oculus Rift DK2 as an input device and 5 Kinects to provide body tracking, which are merged into one coordinate system using the Creepy Tracker toolkit. We limited the carpet size as a subset of the available tracking to provide a reliable tracking space. We used an abstract mesh avatar in the first person, and this avatar was used for both male and female participants. This avatar representation was selected as an abstract avatar as an output of the study presented on the paper Keep My Head on My Shoulders from ACM VRST 2018, which indicates that the graphical fidelity of the avatar in the first person affects travel quality factors. So in the first user study, we recruited 18 participants for this study, 2 of which were female. The ages of the users varied from 21 to 35 years old, with an average of 25, and standard deviation of 3.5. And 13 participants had already previous experience with VR technologies. So we implemented 3 different techniques for direction indication, and all of these techniques, the speed was limited to 3 meters per second. We chose the speed to isolate the direction indication phase and to not induce cyber sickness effects. And a wand was used to trigger movement. So the first technique tested was a novel technique called elevated low steering, which uses the degrees of freedom separation strategy to control direction, which is a common approach in mid-air manipulation techniques to improve precision, such as used in the work by Mendes et al. Used for object manipulation. On this technique, the direction on the horizontal plane is controlled by the projection of the user's gate on the horizontal plane. Additional buttons were used to control direction on the vertical plane. On the gaze technique, people control their direction using the direction of the heads, and on the hand technique, by the orientation of the user's hands. Due to Kinect's limitations, we attached a reflexive rigid body to be able to track our 3D wand using a 12 OptiTrack Flex 3 camera rig, and this was mapped into the user's dominant hand. To guide users through the scene, we positioned rings to indicate the desired path. Only one ring was shown at a time, and once crossed, successfully or not, that ring disappeared and a new ring appeared in the predefined location. This test consisted of 22 rings along a path with a length of 180 meters, and it included abrupt changes in the z-coordinate. To compare the techniques, we used the metrics time, collision time, number of collisions, path length, and a 6 Likert scale questionnaire response for subjective metrics. For the continuous variables, we used the Shapiro-Wilk test to assess data normality, and because the samples were not normally distributed, we used the Friedman non-parametric test to identify the main effects. Then we used Wilcoxon sign rings tests with Bonferroni correction. We also used Wilcoxon sign rings on the questionnaire as a discrete variable. So as a result, we found that the elevated plus steering technique had the worst results in our tests. It was the least efficient technique in terms of total time because the users spent most of their time colliding with objects, and it was also the technique with the longest travel distance among the 3 tested techniques. The results for the gaze and hand-oriented steering techniques were similar to those found by Bowman and all, where the gaze technique had advantages in terms of distance traveled, and the hand advantage in collision time. Additionally, users indicated that the hand technique allowed them to be more aware of the presence of a virtual body, which corroborates with the shorter amount of collision time. The participants also found it easier to indicate the direction of movement and to navigate in the virtual environment using the hand technique as indicated by the questionnaires. And another advantage of the hand technique is that it enables the decoupling between movement and camera control, enable him or her to inspect the virtual scene while traveling. So, as the output of our first study, we can indicate that the hand technique was the best performing technique to indicate direction. So, in the second user study, we assessed the impact of interaction fidelity for controlling speed when flying in virtual environments. The test design and methodology used in this test were similar to those in the previous study. So we recruited 18 participants, and 2 of which were female, and also the ages varied from 21 to 35, and the majority of them had previous experience with VR. We also use the same virtual environment and present a task similar to that in the previous experiment, but following a different path. This path was longer, measuring 330 meters, and contained abrupt changes in the Z position. We also incorporated more complex maneuvers, such as U-turns, to force users to carefully control their speed while they flew. As a result of the previous study, we used the hand technique as means to indicate direction, and the upper limit speed was 5 meters per second. In this study, we tested 3 different techniques for speed control. The joystick, where the speed was controlled through the analog stick, and in this technique, we just used include movement in the positive side of the analog stick. We also used 2 different techniques with a high level of interaction fidelity: the speed circle, which uses the human body as a joystick, which was inspired by McMahon. And in this technique, users close to the border of the circle have maximum speed. We render an additional circle in yellow to prevent users from stepping outside the circle when reaching the maximum speed zone. The circle is divided in positive and negative halves, which are updated according to the user's orientation. Only when users were on the positive side half of the circle, they were able to control speed of movement. These features makes the movement to stop when making abrupt movements, such as U-turns, and people could prevent this by moving their body while traveling. And we explicitly said that to users to avoid this to happen. And the last technique was the walking in place, which emulates the action of walking but remaining stationary. To comparing the techniques, we used the metrics time, collision time, number of collisions, path, speed variation, and 6 Likert scale for subjective metrics. We also used a similar statistical analysis for this test and found that in our result, we noticed that users experience more difficulty in coordinating the direction indication speed control phases with the walking in place technique. Consequently, they had more difficulty to control speed as more participants stopped the speed control movement when they reached a ring, then pointed to the next ring, and then flew to it. With this technique, users also felt more cyber-sick. Regarding embodiment, users felt less control over their virtual bodies with the walking in place, and this may be attributed to the noise in the depth sensor signals. Another interesting point reported by the participants was that they lost balances in some cases because of the weight compensation that occurred naturally during their gait in real life, for which the emulated experience did not entirely match the actual experience. With this, we can infer that walking in place was the least suitable in terms of test performance in comparison to the other 2, but still efficient. The joystick technique was found to be generally the most efficient, and this may be explained by the familiarity the users already had with video games. However, in most cases, the user did not finally control the speed as indicated in the figure, but instead maintained the maximum speed most of the time. We can also report that joystick rotation did not induce increased cyber stiffness in flying tests as opposed to room scale VR. And the speed circle was not the most efficient technique, but in this technique, they had a more precise control of speed, including the abrupt movements. So people also pointed that more training could improve their performance with the speed circle technique, as people reported that they got lost in the circle, but quickly compensated by recentering themselves. They also stated they need to periodically look down at the circle, which affect their performance. Previous work indicates the high interaction fidelity technique can translate into quality factors in ground constraint scenarios when VR technology is used, but we found that interaction fidelity does not always translate into quality factors in flying tests. Although the joystick technique has been proven optimal, we can still identify the speed circle as a good alternative when more precise speed control is required. So in this paper, we can conclude that we evaluated our magic carpets, and we can say that this design space is indeed an effective way to fly in VR and enable the use of high interaction fidelity techniques for flying by decoupling the unnatural control of multiple degrees of freedom. Inside that design space, we also can notice that high interaction fidelity techniques can improve quality factors, especially with a more precise control is needed. But this kind of technique not always translates into quality factors. So finally, I want to thank my advisors and everybody that is listening to me right now. Thank you. Stop recording.